Hello everybody, my name is Frank. Also shout out to the guys in the live stream, greetings. As you can read on the slides, I'm going to talk about how skateboarders are actually transforming Innsbruck's Landhausplatz into a theatrical stage. I added this picture so we have kind of an idea how it looks in the place that I'm going to talk about, because it's quite important. As you can tell, the infrastructure is quite skate ramp-like, which leads skateboarders to interact with them in the way they do, which is quite important for why skateboarders actually like to meet there. Just quickly to the theoretical superstructure or intellectual superstructure of my research, I'm referring to Martina Löw and her relational approach to space. Irving Goffman and his dramaturgical analysis of everyday life, he applies a kind of theatrical lens to social interactions between humans. And also, is this supposed to end? It's William, not William, I'm sorry. William H. White, who researched small urban spaces, and it made me understand the space that I was looking at a bit better. So, my arguments, what do I want to convey of? What do I want you to believe me? In the best case? Well, I argue that the social interactions, and especially the activity of skateboarding, of the skateboarders on the Landhausplatz, resemble a theatrical performance. I also argue that public spaces are not static, but actually socially constructed. Space is continuously reshaped and shaped by human interactions. The space is therefore dynamically constructed through these interactions, and that the physical space itself gives actually rise to specific interactions with the place. For example, like the guys you saw before. This wouldn't be possible if it wasn't shaped like that. So I'm going to kind of skip over that because I don't want to lose too much time. I'll come back if I have enough time later. But little fun fact, like Einstein and his theory of relativity is probably very important for this social approach to space, because he argues that space and time are in relation and are always like relative. It's not like a strict and static entity. And that led other researchers to look at physical spaces in a different way and starting to analyze it as a social category. So my methods in my research design are quite basic, I would say. It's a participant observation in combination with structured interviews. And I chose this topic because back in the day I used to skateboard myself. RIP to my back at this point. I sadly am not allowed to do it anymore. But that's how I came, to the place, and I wanted to kind of dive deep into it. I described the key user groups of the Landhausplatz as the skateboarders, the pedestrians, and also the sitters. The sitters being the people that are sitting on the place. Right. What I actually found out then, when I was looking at the interactions of the space, is that because I skateboarded myself, I knew this certain performance aspect that skateboarding comes along with. Because when you skateboard in front of people, you are kind of trying to always convey the onlookers that you are like really cool and easy about the tricks that you're going to attempt. The term that is used there is steezy, actually, which is a combination of stylish and easy. And that's when it started to make sense to me. I was like, all this time I've actually been looking at a stage, at a theatrical stage, or even a play, because we do have an audience, the sitters and the pedestrians, and we do have performers on the other side. So, what are my evidence and findings? Let's start with the audience. The audience is a metaphorical audience, obviously, but also a literal one, because it is composed of the sitters, the people that are sitting on the place, funnily enough, not on the benches, because the benches are actually turned away from the action in the middle of the square. Oh yeah, also, this picture that I chose, it's quite cheating, you know. This is not the normal everyday life setting of the Landhausplatz. This was during a skateboarding competition, but it shows the stage and the audience quite well, and it brings across my point quite well, I would say. Yeah, so I added that picture, just to make a point. Yeah, but William H. White actually argues that what these people are doing is called people watching, and people like to watch people. He says that what attracts people the most, it would appear, is other people. So it makes total sense that also non-skateboarders would frequent the Landhausplatz in Innsbruck. Along my interviews, I actually found that a lot of sitters are exactly there for that specific reason. A lot of them intentionally position themselves on the plaza in a way that allows them to watch the skateboarders in the middle of the square. And as I said, the benches don't make you look into the square, so they find their spots all around. The Landhausplatz even has a front stage and backstage, just like a real theater, basically. The front stage is the area just in front of the memorial, and this cluster of people sitting there are the skateboarders, and that's basically the backstage. It's the stairs of the memorial. I'll come back to that a little later. So we have our audience, and we do have our stage, but what about the performers? Because of Martina Löw and Erwin Goffman, I kind of tried to understand how I could myself look at this place as a theatrical stage, because it obviously is not a theatrical stage, right? But that's what Martina Löw argues in her process of synthesizing, that people are synthesizing different elements into one, like they give it meaning. And I gave it meaning in a way that is a theatrical stage. So, wait, I lost my point. Yeah, exactly. So the skateboarders, when they actually enter the place, they are already skateboarding. What is funny is that I found out that most of the time when I was sitting at the corner building, I could hear the wheels hit the ground just moments before they appeared on the stage, on the place. But what it did is, it made people believe that they were skating through town all this time, you know? And that's actually a moment where the performance already started. They're appearing on the stage, skateboarding. Oh damn, he must be good, you know? So, as I already mentioned, they try to make it look very easy and effortless when they ride around. Just like an actor in a play that has rehearsed his role to such an extent that he truly starts to embody this character. When failing a trick, for example, they often just jump back on the board very elegantly, and they try to look relaxed and keep up this facade of the ever cool skater. They almost never fall out of the road, actually. What I also found is that skaters are wearing similar costumes when performing on the metaphorical stage. They normally wear clothes that you can obtain from skateboarding shops, showing their affiliation with the skateboarding subculture, but also highlighting the fact that they are part of the main cast even when they are not actively performing on the main stage. Now lastly, there's this really interesting dynamic regarding the different stage sections. As established, I consider the free space in front of the memorial to be the main stage, but the backstage, the stairs, are just as important. Along the lines of Erwin Goffman, the backstage is where individuals can drop their societal roles and be themselves without the pressure of performing for an audience. They sit down on the stairs to take a break from their activity. And this backstage area, quite interestingly, is actually closed off to the audience in a way, because you legit never see non-skateboarders sit on these stairs, legit never. And it's almost like in a theater, where you also have like a seating arrangement, and you have areas that are only accessible to staff and the actors. And actually, I thought that when I was rehearsing my thing now, I thought that this the monument kind of looks like a proscenium, like the arc that's over the stage. Okay, so Do I still have time for my claims and significance? Yeah, perfect. Okay, on a final note, I want to argue why and how the type of research I conducted could be of future use and interest. The significance of my research lies in several key areas, actually. Firstly, it enhances our understanding of urban spaces by demonstrating their dynamic nature. My study shows how social interactions not only shape, but are also shaped by their environment. Secondly, this research makes a valuable contribution to spatial sociology. By integrating the theories of Löw and Goffman, it provides practical application of relational and performative perspectives on space. Thirdly, there are important implications for urban design. The insights gained from this study can inform the design of public spaces to foster positive social interactions, emphasizing the need to consider the performative aspects of these environments. And lastly, my research opens avenues for future exploration. It suggests potential studies on other public spaces using similar frameworks, and it highlights the impact of architectural design on social behavior. These contributions underscore the broader relevance of examining public spaces through a relational and performative lens. Thank you so very much for listening.
Thank you. Next presenter is Christina Darkuzas from the Charles University.
Hello, thank you for tuning into my presentation. My name is Christina. I'm from Charles University in the sociology department. I'm originally from the US. And the project I'll be presenting to you today is concerning the relationship between new religious movements and cultural heritage. Specifically, ISKCON, or the Hare Krishna movement, and some cultural heritage sites in Old Town Prague and in a castle that was repurposed in Belgium. Sorry, I'm not. So the overarching research question I have with this project is related to the framework of post-secularism, which has been promoted by Habermas and studied by other scholars, which argues that in contemporary times, religious institutions still have an influence, and so it can be helpful to examine the interactions between secular and non-secular spaces and institutions. So in the case studies I'm presenting, they could be examples of this non-secular interacting with previously secular or currently considered secular tourist destinations. And also specifically how they, which specific ways that they enchant or sacralize these spaces. It's an ethnographic project. So existing scholarship on cultural heritage sites and new religious movements, specifically on ISKCON, have focused on ISKCON's ability to preserve the cultural heritage sites that are kind of native or authentic to them in India, so like their temples, and also the movement's ability to spread what might be considered traditional Indian culture globally, because it's a global movement. And this is related to the beginning of the movement. It was founded by a guru initiated in a devotional aspect of Hinduism in India. It's called Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and basically he wanted to spread this devotional Hinduism and the culture to the West. Specifically, he went to the US, to New York, and he was chanting in the city by himself is how it started, and he attracted followers. And this can be an interesting movement to study for people who are studying cultural heritage and how new religious movements are able to influence contemporary followers because it was rooted in this traditional, like Indian Hinduism devotional sect. So it has that and the culture aspects, but then it's also tried to adapt to Western views and to Western and contemporary followers. And existing scholarship on the relationship between new religious movements, particularly ISKCON, and its ability to attract followers. Some predominant scholars are E. Burke Rockford Jr., and he talks about how ISKCON is able to help people feel like they're connecting with community. Also, they really promote public services and food distribution with their prashad meals. And then there's Thomas J. Hopkins, who talks about cultural translation and syncretism that ISKCON is able to do. So, for example, they've really, in the UK, incorporated these practices of yoga, vegetarianism, and meditation. They really promote their belief system and invite people to participate in these kinds of practices. So the case studies, I participated in a chanting retreat at Radhadesh in Belgium. It's this repurposed castle. As you can see, it has some Gothic architecture, which some scholars also say is able to enchant visitors because it's kind of awe-inspiring or it induces emotion. And you can just start to see kind of what their spaces look like. The Radhadesh example is really an example of the movement taking a place that has cultural significance in the local community and making it into a kind of spiritual retreat that's their own, and where they impart their cultural aspects as well, the Indian. And then Old Town Prague, where they perform Harinams, the festivities, I think is really an example of how they don't redecorate or put their cultural heritage posted anywhere, but they kind of use elements of enchantment at these sites, like the cultural significance, the historical significance, and even like mystical symbols and things to help people try to participate in their chanting. And so when we're considering kind of the cultural, the Indian aspects of this movement and the relation to cultural heritage sites, I start to question like what is authentically their cultural heritage versus how they've adapted to Western ideals. Or, for example, in the US, they may have a house at a university, kind of like if you think of a fraternity house, but it's for ISKCON, and you can practice meditation there. So you start to wonder what aspects are cultural. And what I'm finding also is that kind of this separation between the cultural elements of the movement, the like foreign aspects, helps the movement seem enchanted to foreign viewers or devotees themselves. And also, it's not only the cultural aspects that make it stand apart from like maybe the local society it's in, but also the philosophical aspects. Prabhupada really wanted 3 aspects to be promoted in the movement. So devotion or like knowledge of God, simple living, so kind of away from materialist thinking or greed, as well as high thinking, so kind of transcendence of what they call the material modes of nature. So there's a lot of philosophical aspects I can go over later in the questions if you're interested. But one of the main findings for this research is that the separation between ISKCON's cultural aspects that have the native Indian elements, like you see the dress here, or the instruments, or the food, the incense they use and things, as well as their philosophy helps them stand apart from these Western or European societies where they're spreading their movement. And another concept that I'm incorporating in this essay is heterotropic space. And this was an idea by Foucault. Originally, it's kind of a space in society that can be thought of as a mirror. So he talks about it not really belonging to the usual like profane society, but at the same time, it allows the people to go there and kind of disconnect from their material and usual experience, reflect, and maybe think of other ways to live. And one scholar, Aaron French, actually writes about this regarding contemporary sacred spaces that were developed at the turn of the 20th century. And specifically, they were Mont Verita in Switzerland and Bad Reichenhall in Germany. And these are places where people could get away from the city, the material living conditions, or what they call kind of the modern living conditions, and kind of feel like they're separate and in a completely different space to reflect, to rejuvenate, and also there were connections to the earth so they could heal as well from the modern living condition, which in this case of ISKCON, I think is really connected because their retreats that they have, they call them spiritual oases, and their cultural elements, which I'll actually show in another picture here. When you go to the spaces, it really feels like you're in a completely different space from like the rest of Belgium in this case. You have the deities, you have the connection to nature, the local farms. You have the elements of European like architecture, but really it feels pretty foreign. And you can see here, this is the participants are able to go for a yoga retreat and disconnect and recharge from society. And so in this way, I argue that this space is enchanted because it helps people get away from what might be considered disenchanted modern society. And then in the case of Harinam in Prague, people aren't physically leaving the city, but ISKCON is bringing their cultural elements, the dance, but also the devotional aspects, so the chanting and the using different Indian instruments to invite people to participate with them. And so in this way, it allows people to participate in these practices of enchantment if they choose. They don't have to, obviously. Yeah, and so this is just kind of summarizing these connections. I argue that the separation between the kind of cultural aspects of ISKCON, the Indian aspects, has a complex relationship to how it's able to fit into contemporary societies and Western societies and belief systems, but also allows it to feel enchanted and also that these spaces, just the performances of kirtan and the repurposing of buildings allows this movement to enchant spaces that were previously disenchanted. And that's all. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. The next speaker is Bianca Cortes Nela from the University of Vienna.
So, well, I would like to talk about exploring African heritage, how its future as a museum is the historical context. And even so, I'm not coming from ethnology. My background is development studies and civic education. I found ethnological methods very useful on my journey through Afro-Colombian heritage. So, first of all, my question was, how can a museum that was even built yet be a form of a reparation? So the ladies we see on these pictures are those who live in a city where the museum will be built in Cali, Colombia. So Cali is a city with quite a lot of Afro-Colombian people. They are 3 million out of 43 million now. And those are the people who the museum should benefit and support. So I went to Colombia and I did a research with all those people. I talked to Montebantu, which is a civic center in an area where main population are Afro-Colombians, and I also talked to the people in Cali as well as in Bogota, where the head of the Afro Museum is sitting at the National Museum. So before we talk about the museum itself, it's necessary to understand that Afro-Colombian people are actually 4 groups. They are formed by Black, Afro-Colombian, Raizal, and Palenquero people. Those are the people, for example, Palenquero, who live in the area of Cartagenareñas, and Raizal live on the islands of San Andres. And it started, their history started in the 16th century when they were brought to the transatlantic slave trade to Colombia. And it was until 1851 that the slavery was abolished in Colombia. And then there was a time when they actually were just called Colombians altogether. There was no difference between if you're black or if you're white or if you're mixed. It didn't matter, they were all like Colombians. And it was until 1991 when the Colombian got a new constitution and they started to see, okay, we are a multi-ethnic and multi-national nation. And it's now until 2021 that they think about building a museum for the Afro-Colombians. They were very much focusing before that on the indigenous people, the indigenous, and the NASA culture, for example, and it was recently that they also recognized that they are more than just indigenous and Colombian people of Spanish heritage. Yeah. Well, Spanish descended people. So. The museum, as I said, is not built yet. Now, the idea is to build a center where the memory will be placed. For example, there will be people who were well known for their achievements, space, like for example was the Memoria, and where also the aftermath of the transatlantic slave trade is represented. The museum is built through a participatory process, so they gave me all this information on the documents, and I saw many videos about the process. It's about the up process, and somehow I found it a little bit like also top, because the National Museum is like the head of the whole institution, and it's very closely linked to the government. So even if you invite the people to create a museum, it's still something that the final decision is by the government. And my findings were that there was a lot of discussion about, for example, if it's really a museum, shall we call it a museum? Or if it's more community center? What about the naming? Does Afro Museum really represent the people of Afro Colombia? Or does it lead more to the idea that there will be things from Africa on display? And also, what's the symbolism, and is it even a form of reparation? What's the role of the museum? How can we use it? Who will have access? Who will be the people who will be talking to the people? Who will be representing our history? And who will be the leaders? Will there be Afro-Colombian people in charge of the museum? And 2 things I would like to point out is, first of all, that Cali is a good decision for a museum, even though some might say that it would be better to place it in Buenaventura, because Buenaventura has a higher black population. Nonetheless, Cali is a very touristic city. It's less dangerous, if you could say it like this, due to recent happenings because of the armed conflict. And it's also annually going on in August. It's a festival where Afro-Colombian are celebrated through gastronomy, traditional drinks, arts, crafts, fashion, and aesthetics. Nonetheless, the tiny problem I encountered when I visited the space where the museum will build that it's actually somehow a building that's not. Yeah, I would say it's the rest of the building was formerly Industrial Indicores and Valle, and there will be a lot of money that needs to be given to the museum to rebuild it. And as you know, in Colombia, things might change with the next government. So before the museum should be open in 2026, government will change, and that's what nobody knows. If the idea of the museum will be also continued with the next presidency. Nonetheless, the museum itself is a place that can empower people, that can empower communities, where people can participate, where they can hold workshops, where they can lift the spirit, their ideas, get together. It can be something that holds the whole community of Colombia, of Afro-Colombian people together, if there's a base for dialogue and understanding. And also, people themselves decide what there will be on display. So it could be, for example, hairstyle inclusion. Like hairstyle is something I encountered a lot in my interviews, because we're all talking about how it was used to communicate during the slave trade times, when they braided hair in different ways just to show each other the way of escape route. And also, for example, literature is still something that's continued nowadays. It's a tradition they still have, and they're very proud of, as well as the songs they sing. And that's my references. And yeah,
Thank you. The last speaker of this session is Rebecca Shusola from the Chavez University.
Hey, hello everyone. I'm Rebecca Shusova, and today I'll talk about the visualization of torture, focusing on the perception of public to such museums located in Western and Central Europe. But my main interest was the torture museum located in Prague at Zelena Street number 12. Alright, to start with the definition, for the visualization of torture, I shall be clear that most of the scholars are quite precise about the description, mostly focusing on other important concepts of the topic. But based on several studies from my work, I defined the concept as a process of turning historical artifacts associated with torture into museum exhibits with the aim of presenting historical context, education of visitors, and prompting reflection on the past use of such tools. In Wedler's and Dyer's work, Dark Tourism, Web Content Evaluation of Visitors' Experience at Selected European Torture Museum, which was essential to the scheme of my own investigation, they introduced us the concept of dark tourism. But it was first defined by John Lennon, not the one from Beatles, and Malcolm Foley in their work Dark Tourism. That was further categorized into a spectrum by Philip Stone in his work Dark Tourism Spectrum into 5 categories. From the darkest to the lightest. And the key explanation for this division is that the more authentic and educational touristic site is, the darker is its categorization. And while the more entertainment-oriented and inauthentic it is, it appears on the lighter side of the scale. In the case of torture museums that Wedler and Dyer had studied, they categorized it into the second or third category of the scale, which means in the category of darker and dark. And to understand this, we could say that the main aim of such museums is not to entertain the public, but rather to educate the people with authentic experience and the authentic experience. However, it is not always strictly the only purpose, and the public perception of museums of torture may be the group. Based on their ethnographic and field work, Redler and Dara conclude that visitors of all 4 museums claim the museums to be very interesting and arousing the visitors' curiosity, both with providing a great educational experience, but many of them at the same time mentioned being scared, obviously. And this inspired me to do a similar analysis, but this time focused only on the Museum of Torture located in Prague. Also, there's been a difference of almost 10 years between their studies and my investigation, which led me also to question if there would be any differences in the perception of visitors of these museums nowadays. However, dark tourism doesn't mean only museums and exhibitions connected to pain and death. And in Stone's work, he says that the element of death has been an important topic of tourism longer than any other form of tourism supply, often connected to religious or pilgrimage purposes, such as gladiators, game, or public executions in medieval times. Meaning dark tourism, as we understand this concept of attraction, of death, disaster, and the macabre to nowadays, as described by Stone, it's anything new for the public. But due to the growing discussion on ethical issues worldwide, the perception of meeting with these with themes of pain and death may differ. So that's why I chose as my research question, how do visitors of museums of torture, in Prague in my case, perceive their visit? Right, so as a background to my analysis, I work with already mentioned Wedler's and Dye's work, following Stone's, as well as out of 3 studies focused on the concept of morbid curiosity and the self and others in torture museums. Of course, I visited the museum myself, all of the photos are taken by me. And I wanted to do interviews with the others, but unluckily I was the only one there at the moment. Besides the ticket seller, who was joking around the moment I walked in. For example, when I asked him if I can take pictures, he was like, yeah, then don't forget to tag us, well, you'll be lonely it online. The best photos are with the burning witch. So I already noticed that the main aim of the museum might not be only the educational aspect. And furthermore, since I already mentioned that I was inspired by Wedler's and Dye's work, which included analysis of online reviews from TripAdvisor, I also applied this procedure, but I also added visitors' feedback from Google reviews. So I worked with open coding, which led me to separately analyze information into 2 groups, one positive and negative reviews. When I'm positive, I added entertainment, authenticity, and education. Under negative, ethical questions, discomfort, criticism of the idea, inauthenticity, poor exhibition, and low education effect. I worked with reviews of 40 visitors that led their review on Google and with 30 from TripAdvisor. While there we can find around 500 reviews, on Google we could find over 1,300, so it was just a tiny fragment of it. But since the museum has changed its location in the last years, I decided to choose these few that were all connected to the appearance of the new one. And also, in both cases, they were up to 6 months old. In one review, I could find more than one code, meaning for my analysis, I give one mention of a given code per person, if it's understandable. And in case of Google reviews, the highest mentioned code was entertainment, meaning the biggest number of people in their reviews talked about how entertaining it was, that their visit was. However, their explanation was often connected to the authenticity and educative importance. On the other hand, many people argued how poor the exhibition was, saying it was just a waste of money and they would like to see more or read more about the exponents. And in case of TripAdvisor, the higher number of mentions was for education, and on the contrary, for poor exhibition as well. And some of the reviews talk about the educative importance, which was lowered by the little offer of the exponents and information. However, entertainment was obviously one of the important aspects as well, following with the paper of authenticity. In case of TripAdvisor, I could also find several mentions about the feeling of discomfort compared to just a few from the Google reviews. Also, there was a higher accent on the low education effect of the museum as a negative effect. A few mentions I could find on both platforms were asking for more interactivity in the museums. So, well, this difference between those who left feedback on Google and TripAdvisor is for another study, but for my investigation, there was important that the aspects of entertainment was overall higher than educational, even though they were both high. So the term morbid curiosity mentioned, for example, by Scribner in 2021, which that I was inspired by, is definitely present, referring to interest or fascination with subjects that are considered disturbing and gruesome. Several mentions, though, were connected to the feeling of empathy, but not always through discomfort or ethical questions, but rather through fascination. So my results led me to that was the slide. So my results led me to questioning if museums of torture should be truly referred as part of the second or third category in self-scale, or they should be part of the category connected more to the entertainment purposes. However, there might be a difference between what was the main purpose of the museums and how the public actually perceive it, but it could be a question for another studies as well. Right, and that's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you. So now it's time for the discussion.
Thank you for your presentations. I have a question to you. I hope you. I'd be interested if you notice a difference in like the time of day, so whether like during the day or in the evening, like different frequency and also if it changed like how the space is used. Sorry. Closer, okay.
I did hear everything actually.
Oh, you didn't hear me?
I did. So yeah, the time plays a really vital role actually in the social life of the Landhausplatz, because in the morning I found that like most young people just crossing it for work purposes. You also have the Landhaus there. You have like a few shops there. You have a bank building there. So you have the purpose changes throughout the day actually, but it's during like peak. I'd say skateboards are peaking after 12 to like 7 or 8. And then after it's all silent, and then in the nightlife it's just next to a few clubs and it kind of gets revitalized again. Because like in my actual study I wasn't focusing on skateboarders, it was like more of a side finding that I found quite interesting and I tried to make it into a presentation. But the Landhausplatz is many different things.
Thank you. I think it's interesting also with the sound, like the kind of whole sound picture, or what you might call it. Like, I think this could be really interesting to even just look at that aspect, like how it kind of maybe even disappears when there's nightclubs open and then it's really not as present anymore, or it's just one of the many loud things and then it's like silent at some point. Thank you.
Thank you for your really interesting presentations. I also have I have two questions. One also for Frank. When you did your participant observation, did you see any differences in terms of gender when they did the performances?
I would argue that skateboarding is still very predominantly man-dominated. We have a lot of projects and also a lot of female skateboarders that are having like idols that they are looking up to. There are like many really great female skateboarders. And I think I've never seen as many female skateboarders as in Innsbruck. Because it's a really young town, we have a lot of students, and most people are like really sporty, and they like skiing, snowboarding, skateboarding, like these activities. And I'd say that yes, there are more males on the place, but there are also plenty of females in comparison to other skate parks that I've visited. Performance-wise, I didn't really look into that back then, but it is quite homogenic actually. They all try to convey the onlookers that they are like skateboarders, and skateboarders have this certain style about them. Just making it look easy, and especially like wearing skateboarding specific brands to just show that you're part of this collective. But there is not a big difference in the way they perform.
Thank you very much. And I also have a question for Rebecca. I don't know if that's a difficult one, probably it's a difficult one to answer, but in Prague I had the feeling in terms of tourism that it is really centered around the theme of torture, and there are a lot of offers like bars and guided tours around torture and the stuff. So do you think in Prague, is there a reason that this is so popular in Prague? Or because I know, of course, the topic of torture is always a bit fascinating to people, but in comparison to other cities, I had the feeling it's a bit more popular.
Well, I don't know if I mentioned it, I don't think so, but actually it's located right next to the Old Town Square, which is like one of the most important touristic and historic sites there. So it was also, and before it was right next to the Charles Bridge, so both of the places are like quite crowded and very like a big tourist attraction, So I agree that it's like a very popular thing there for some reason, and it's very. I think it's. I think it might be perceived as the real medieval experience, which is used as once again like as a tourist attraction there in Prague. So I guess that might be one of the reasons, but I cannot really describe why is it like this. But yeah, I could sense it as well.
Thank you for your presentation. I also have a question for Rebecca. Have you thought about considering the view from the inside as well? I'm just wondering whether their perception of the purpose of the museum differs from the ones of the visitors. I think you've already mentioned your impressions from the jewel work, that like someone thought maybe there was more in entertainment, with an entertainment purpose, but maybe you have some more insights.
I don't know if I understand this question because it was mostly focused on how did the visitors perceive it. So I don't know what are you really asking.
I'm asking like whether you also considered researching how the workers.
The workers. Well, yeah, that's the thing. Well, I didn't. I had like a little talk with the ticket seller, and that was pretty much all because otherwise I contacted them on email, and they never responded. Even though I contacted them twice, asking like, hey, can you just give me a few information like how many people visit the museum or like general questions, and they never responded. So I couldn't really ask anyone else, and because there was only this guy. There was, to be honest, quite a pleasure to me to talk to, or yeah. So I just had like this little talk with him, and there was, but I never really asked him, to be honest, like, hey, how do you perceive it? I was like mostly talking about the appearance of it, or yeah, as I said before, like how he was recommending me to take a picture with the burning witch. Yeah, so.
I have a question to Bianca.
Okay.
As I understood, because it's in the works like to build this museum, and this kind of this open call, as you said, it's like a bottom-up process, so for people to participate. What have you found, like who are other people who participate and who kind of respond to this open, opportunity to collaborate or to join the process?
Well, the collaboration processes were going on mainly in three cities. Cali, where a museum will be built, in Bogota, the capital city of Colombia, and Quito. And the people who were actually attending the events were locals who were interested and who had connections. So when I arrived in Cali, I talked to a lot of people I randomly met through different events that were going on while I was on the research process there, on a field trip. And many knew about the museum, but they didn't participate. So, for example, the week where they held all these meetings, where they asked people, how do you imagine a museum, what would you like to have as a museum, was taking, for example, place during the Antonio Alvarez Festival I mentioned. And only those people who actually attended the Antonio Alvarez Festival were also those who were answering the questions, and it wasn't something that everybody visibly was involved, for example, from the community. So I think it has something to do also with connections, with who knows who, and not going out into the suburban areas.
Thank you.
I have a question to Christina. You mentioned that you also participated in one of those chanting sessions in Belgium, right?
Yes.
That was at a cultural heritage site.
Yes, I didn't mention during the presentation.
Yeah.
I forgot, but the Belgian chateau, it was originally actually owned by, I guess it was a gift to a monastery or a monk. So originally it had the sense of enchantment and religion, and then it was just gifted to nobility. And so for years it was just owned by like noble people, and then it was purchased by ISKCON in the 1970s and converted into a temple.
Okay, and do you think like the setting at the heritage site did it enhance the experience? Yeah.
Yes, I actually did mention, but there's this element of the syncretism, which is like, it's this feeling where you're practicing these devotional practices connected to this religious movement, but you're in a place that's like used to be considered royal or something, so it's like the castle, the architecture. So it's just kind of, I think you get into this feeling of awe in the person like participating. That was the major thing that I noticed.
Thank you.
I have two questions. One to the two presenters who work on museums is you are presenting us both with very different examples of museums, and so I want to ask, what is a museum? How do you conceptualize it with respect to your work? And the other question or should they answer first, and then I'll ask you.
Well, as I've mentioned, I encountered a lot of discussion about if it should be called a museum, because what people are expecting in Colombia is not really a museum as we may know it from before. Even though the ICAP definition of museum has changed recent years. Before, a lot of people, well, I think a lot of people in Colombia, for example, could consider a museum as a place where you can go and see artifacts, and it's not a living museum, it's not something where you can experience something, it's just where you can watch or look at something. And I think the idea of a museum is quite different also if you in a European context from a Latin American context. And for me, I would support the idea of changing it from a museum to community center, where they actually give the people of Colombia, the Black community of Colombia, as the impression that you can build something, that you can have experiences, workshops, etc. So yeah, I think it's very different from what we might consider museum in Europe.
Well, in the context of my investigation, my topic, well, I would say that, as I already had it in the definition, it's like collecting things that are themed with torture and pain in one place. And yeah, I think the main aim is still to educate, but the difference, well, sorry, I need to summarize it in my head first, but I think even though the main aim of it is to educate, there's still the difference between that and how the public perceive it. So maybe they don't want to go there to educate themselves, but to, I don't know, fulfill their weird needs or like this morbid curiosity. But you can say this about any other museum. Like, I mean, I would say that there is. Okay, maybe I shouldn't try to say anything rude, but okay, I think I already described it in the presentation. Sorry.
Thank you. And then to you in the middle, you're both, your presentations have to do with places or spaces being used in ways that maybe their initial designers didn't intend, or some kind of reappropriation of a space. And I'm wondering whether if we switched your analytic vocabularies, if, like you were talking, could you think about the Rathausplatz and its use in terms of enchantment or re-enchantment? And could you think about the spaces and these new religious movements as somehow performing a Goffmanian play, or thinking about the relationality of space or something like that? Just as a thought.
That's really interesting, because I would like to do that. Maybe I can pull some of our sources for the theatrical play. Because, yeah, like, they say that it's spiritual, but it's also just, like, the foreign aspect, their cultural, like, dress and music, and it's, like, how much of that is just performing versus some religious component. I would be interested maybe to piece out.
Well, I'd say if I had to apply this perspective to Landhausplatz, it would probably be to its meaning as a memorial site and as a place of cultural memory. So I did talk to a few people that come there to, think about the Reich Kristallnacht, for example, like the atrocities that happened there because maybe it was a family member, or so it's kind of difficult, but I feel like it would very well be possible, because at the end of the day, it's how people construct a space, how it is seen by them, that makes it real for them. Maybe not for me, but for them. And if it's spiritual and enchanted for them, I mean, it's real. That's kind of what my thing was about as well. That spaces get their meanings in relation to other aspects, other little elements and meanings that you tie together, and you find your meaning in this place. So I'd say it would be possible, probably. Thank you for the question.
question to Christina, actually. I was wondering whether you found it difficult to do ethnographic research in connection to like more religious practice, because I was wondering like kind of what ethical questions you were confronted with, or also kind of documentation. Maybe it's like, I don't know, it depends, because I felt like this performative, it is performative to be seen, like in the streets, and I guess like documentation of it is not really, like, maybe that's not as, yeah, but within these like spaces, the closed off spaces, and might be like considered like sacred spaces also.
Yeah, I think it's always tricky when you're doing any kind of ethnography with something personal and intimate to people, and if you're participating yourself. I think, so for the Bangladesh experience in Belgium, that was last year before I knew about this project. So whenever I participate with this group, because I know I want to perform like ethnography on them, I take like autoethnographic notes and observations, like field notes. I think in that way, it made it kind of easier to talk about for this project, because I could kind of generalize from the notes I took, and I was thinking about different aspects of cultural heritage, so looking at like how they have their iconography and their food, so like the more material aspects. So it wasn't so much about like people's personal experiences. That is something I'd like to bring into the project, is some semi-structured interviews with people at the Bangladesh and then who participate in these experiences. But I would ask permission from them and tell them where it's going and everything. So if they're willing to participate, I usually would say, if you feel later you'd like to omit something, you can let me know and we can rework it and things. So thank you.
So any other questions? So I have one question for Frank. I was thinking about, you said that the Landhausplatz is, the ground is like, it's used by the skaters, yeah? It has started somehow because of the shape and so on. And then it got attention of the people who are watching the skaters there. Would you, or was it even, got your attention, the point that the skaters might be motivated to go there because of the audience too, that it's not only the shape, perhaps, of the space, but in the meantime, it develops something else?
It's a really interesting question. I don't want to say no, but I don't want to say yes. The thing is, why I like to go there is because of how the sun hits the square. First of all, it's really, really sunny during the day. And you can see the Nordkette just above the Landhaus, so it's a really nice setting. And you have like, it's just like the situation, like its position in the city. If I want to grab a drink, I can do that. There's a terrace just on the place as well. And I think what's really nice is maybe not because they are like the pedestrians and the sitters that are the onlookers and making this a theatrical play. Maybe it's because a lot of skateboarders are actually meeting there anyway. So even if you don't know anyone, you can kind of connect with the people. And the skateboarders can also be like the jury somehow, giving you tips if you ask them. And it's a nice social bubble as well. So I feel like it's just this hub of connectivity for some people. And I wouldn't say that it's mainly because there's an audience, but it could be. It's also quite a famous place. There are a lot of famous skateboarders that are traveling through Europe and stopping by in Innsbruck to shoot some footage there, because it is already known in the skateboarding community. So that also draws people near to the place. So I think it's all intertwined and connected. I hope that's the right answer.
Yeah, no, it definitely is.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. So if there are no questions anymore, we can do a short coffee break and then start with the final session. Thank you.